恭敬大德善听，为四法为记一切众生，经转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生所托死离苦得乐。速战无声。Will the Sangha with great virtue out of compassion for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to leave suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchetoye alahati sanmiao sanputo che. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it, and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Namo, quelling disasters, slanting life, Medicine Master Buddha. 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 Medicine Master does come one. 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 Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, and all good knowing advisors, Amitabha, welcome back to our lecture on the Dharma using the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra as our foundation. This is lecture number 147. Today we are beginning our class 15 minutes early, and I have a feeling based on the number of people online right now that most people, half of you all might have forgotten, more than half. So we'll just give a few minutes for more people to join if they're going to join. So let me buy some time, fill up the time by asking if there's any questions from anyone or anything you want to bring up or share. No? Yes?
So far, sure. I would like to uh, say that on at CTTB in July they've announced that they're going to have the precepts for the deceased. And I think I've only been to one of these. Like when I first came, when I first um, started, as a Buddhist. So I didn't really understand what this is all about. Could you explain this?
Oh, okay. Precepts for the deceased is where we take a form of the Bodhisattva precepts on behalf of a deceased relative, or I think it can even it doesn't, I don't think it has to be a relative, but most people take it on behalf of their relatives who have passed away. So usually a parent, sibling, a child. And what happens is if the relative has passed away and they haven't gone for rebirth yet, especially if, say, sometimes the death isn't a natural process, that's one. Or it they might have been born in an unfortunate realm, say in the realm of the hungry ghost. Then what happens is, if you can take the precepts on their behalf, what they what people have reported is that for some of them, they encounter certain experiences, such as they have a dream that their relative tells them that, oh, you should take this precept on my behalf. You're not actually taking it on their behalf. You are standing in for them. So when the instructions given during the ceremony is that for you to be mindful of that person, and then you are holding that plaque. So sometimes people receive dreams from their relatives to indicate that this is something they want, that they should do on behalf of their relative. Sometimes when they go in, they feel as if the plaque that they are holding is very heavy. But once the ceremony is over, then they feel that the plaque is really light, for example. Then let me see if can I remember. Uh,
Do they have
there
to
are
be?
other.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
Ron.
I just want to ask before I forget. Do they have to be? Do they have to be Buddhist, or does the person who attends the ceremony have to be Buddhist or not? Oh, two questions.
Okay, no, both also no. The person attending on behalf of the deceased relative does not have to be Buddhist, and the deceased relative does not have to be Buddhist either. Because what happens is this: if for the deceased relative, if they are in a place where they need help, where they need assistance, for us, we have labels like Buddhism, and we have different forms of practice. But during the Buddha's time, a lot of the practices that we do now and the labels that we use did not exist. So if, say, you were a god in one of the heavens and you're looking down, and you will realize that human beings over the years, so for the gods, the last 5,000 years might be just like 1 week. So within 1 week, you see humans suddenly separating the teachings into the Theravada, the Mahayana, and then within the Mahayana, they make differences with the Vajrayana, like the Tibetan Buddhism, and then they divide further based on the culture of the country that it comes from, and then they see Buddhism being divided up, and then they see a lot of different practices that never existed before. So the label Buddhism we tend to attach to, but when it comes to our deceased relatives and when they need help, any kind of help is welcome. So they will. I'm not sure how it works, but it's up. Basically, it's also up to them. If they don't want to, then in the first place, your relative might not need it because they might have already gone for rebirth, for example. So they may not need it. And then if they, how you say, if for them labels are still important, and they say, oh, I don't want to be part of this, then then nothing changes. But what happens is, you, as someone who cares for the people who are no longer around, you want to do, if you were in on the other side, you would want your relatives to do whatever they can to help you if you needed help, right? So regardless of their beliefs, regardless of your belief, if you think it's something good, it should be, if you really care for that person, then you wouldn't mind undertaking something like that. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Ron?
Yes, it's very good. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any stories about anyone they know who have taken the bodhisattva, the precepts for the deceased, or your own personal story? Do you want to share? Anyone? No? Mr. Tan? I'm sure you would have a story or two.
Pastor,
Yes.
my mother passed away around 15 years ago. So my daughter and help her to take the disease precept for her grandmother. That is my mother, because she already passed away 15 years ago. And then my father already taken the 5 precepts before he passed away. So I'm not going to take this precept for him.
Okay. Is your daughter, which daughter, I don't know how many daughters you have, is it Jin Nanshe?
Yeah, Jingnan.
Oh, okay. Did she have any kind of experience to share about the ceremony?
No idea, because that is in CTTB.
Ah, okay. Okay, good. All right. Thank you for sharing, Mr. Tan.
Okay.
Okay. We have more people with us now. Just a reminder, we now start 15 minutes earlier. So we start at 9:30. And thanks to Ron, we had a question about precepts for the deceased. Okay, so last week, what did we do? Last week, we are still on the topic of gender. So last week, we looked how gender came to be, but we haven't finished. So we're going to continue today. We looked at how there were, how this nun who was an arahat, when Mara, or the Buddhist equivalent of the devil, Mara, tried to disturb her practice, she and said, "Oh, you're a woman. What can a woman achieve?" And she shot back at Mara. What has being a woman have to do with it? All right. So why are we on gender? Because the sutra, not just the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra, but the Earth Sutra, sometimes, not sometimes, they have there's parts in the sutra that say that if women practice, then in their next life they will no longer be born a woman, they will be born a man. So it seems as if, okay, on the surface it seems like, oh, you're saying women are no good, or women are at a disadvantage, or what is it really is going on in the sutras. So that's why we are looking at gender, and looking at how ultimately your gender does not make a difference. Okay, and I have some interesting sutras to share to show that. Ron, do you have a question, Ron?
Yeah, I was just wondering, between birth and, between birth and rebirth, if one is already a man, is there like a switch? Is there, I don't know how to say it, but can they be reborn as a woman, or as a woman, currently? and when they die, they get reborn as a man, without them
Yeah.
asking either, like to be a man or a woman. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course. When you are, how you say, there's no guarantee in your next life if you will be a man or a woman. No guarantee at all. Yeah, let's put it that way. I actually have a verse from there. Let me look for it, okay, and we can discuss it. Not just in next life. There's a story, like an actual story, where there was this man who was, I think he was the treasurer of the city, or was the son of the treasurer, and he saw one monk. He saw an arhat who was changing his clothes, and this arhat, I think it was Mahakasyapa. I'll find out. I have it. I just have to look for it. And he had a false thought. He said, "Oh, this monk has such lovely golden skin." He said, "May I?" Something like, "I want my wife. Can he be my wife, or I want to be his wife, or may my wife also have that skin?" And on the spot, he transformed into a woman. Yeah, it was very strange. And so he ran away, or she ran away, and his servant was looking for him, couldn't find him because he was a totally different person. And a few years later, he married a man. She married a man, had children, and somehow or other got to apologize to the monk and got transformed back into a man again. That's exactly the verse I was looking for. If I can't look for it at the end of today's class, I will share it next week. It's a very interesting story. Okay, all right. Yes. So
I,
there is.
I
Yeah,
I
Ron.
have one other one that you kind of brought up, and that is like um, in your talks today, will you get into like the causes and conditions that cause one to change from one gender to another?
Come again. Sorry, Ron. Could you just say that again?
Yeah, like, is there certain causes and conditions that one creates in this lifetime that causes one to be reborn in the opposite gender?
You mean like from a man to a woman, or from a woman to a man?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, why don't we get to that towards the end of the class? All right.
Okay.
Under Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. So first, let's finish our exploration of how gender came to be. Okay. So last week, we haven't finished, but basically we saw in a sutra called the Agana Sutra, and this is repeated in other sutras as well. The Buddha says this is how human beings came to be formed on Earth, and the universe, or the world, undergoes three phases. There's a phase of coming into being, then there's a phase of abiding, which is where we are right now, and then there's a phase of destruction, or decline. And when the world is coming into being, they say that there's a primordial soup that appears on the surface of the earth. And what happens is, beings from the heavens of the second dhyana, they pass away, and then they are born on this earth. And when they are born, they still possess the deva-like qualities, but they're not devas anymore, which is why they start to out of curiosity, they start to consume this growth on this earth. Okay, all right. So let me see. Where were we? So last week we looked at here. They say at that time, there being let me see. Okay, I'll just quickly read. As these beings' lifespans come to an end and they pass away from the Abhasara realm, that's the heaven or the second dhyana. There are 3 heavens, that's the highest heaven. They were reborn into the vicinity of the earth. At first and for a very long time. Very long time here means multiples of billions of years. All right. They retain the characteristics of a Brahma, as listed above, as well as being spontaneously born, meaning that when born, they just flash into existence fully formed, like magic. There being no gender distinctions and no sexual reproduction among Brahma beings. So at this stage, no male or female, or you could say they're just all male. All right. And then although they were at this stage virtually indistinguishable from the Abhasara beings they had been, the commentary makes clear that they should be classed as part of the human realm. All right. Then, okay, this is where they say they describe the world was, the earth was submerged in a primordial water and covered with some kind of growth. Okay, we already look at this. And okay, this is where we continue. Says these beings began consuming more of this growth, and this growth is apparently very tasty. Okay, last week we saw how it had a very nice color like butter, very nice aroma, very nice taste. So they began consuming more until they began breaking off great chunks of it's called rasa patavi, thus further entangling themselves in the world of coarse sensuality as their bodies become coarser and their self-luminance disappeared. They were now plunged into darkness. So they no longer illuminated the world with their light. Originally, they illuminated the world with light that came from their bodies themselves. But because they started eating more and more of this food, they lost their light. So this is quite similar to the principle of Jainism. People who practice, the Jains practicing Jainism, their understanding of karma is slightly different from Buddhism. They feel that the more karma you create that has to do with the earth, the more you're binded by the earth. So it's very, very strong parallel. I do not know if their principle was, their teaching was derived from this. That I do not know. All I know is that the very, very strong similarities. So very strict Jain practitioners, they cover their mouth. So when they breathe, they don't even ingest any microscopic living beings. They don't eat roots. So like potatoes, all those things that grow underground, they don't eat, because if you pull out these roots from the ground, you might harm living beings. So they're very strict. Yeah. So okay, coming back. Sutra says it was at this point that the sun and moon appeared, and the reckoning of time by days, fortnights, months, and years. This marks the end of the expansion of the universe and the beginning of the era of our current world. We might say that with the appearance of the heavenly bodies in their regular orbits, we have entered into ordinary historical time. Okay, so that's quite interesting. Then it says, though no longer quite Brahma-like, they are still glorious and long-lived relative to modern humans, and they are not yet divided into genders. As time goes on, beings lapse into greater and greater immorality and become coarser and shorter-lived. The devolution process, okay, devolution, people, there's some people who believe that humans came from apes, so Buddhism has a slightly different evolution, theory of evolution or devolution. Anyway, the devolution process may be divided into 7 stages, and the process itself is represented by the types of nourishment available. The first stage is the descent of the beings from the Abhasara Brahma world or heaven, when the world is illuminated by their radiance and the beings feed on bliss. So the first stage is when they haven't eaten the growth on earth yet. You know, in my mind, I think of it like algae or moss, although algae and moss isn't very palatable. But anyway, okay. Oh, one thing, if you remember from many months ago, I'm not sure I covered it, but I think I did. human beings, we go through a cycle. Within this time of abiding, for every 100 years, our lifespan decreases 1 year. So human beings start off at a lifespan of 84,000 years. So this will come at the end of these 7 stages. All right. So right now their lifespan is very long, but when they become fully formed human beings with different genders, then the lifespan of human beings is 84,000 years. And every 100 years, the lifespan reduces 1 year until where we are right now. And if you have a calculator, you can calculate how long that's been. And right now we are in the stage of decline, where every 100 years, the average lifespan decreases by 1 year until we reach the average lifespan of, I think, 5 years or 10 years. I think it's 10 years. At that time, when humans are born, babies are no longer like babies now. When they are born, they can kill each other already. They can run around and find weapons and murder each other, just like some animals can do that. Yeah. And that marks the lowest point of humanity, whereby from then on, the sutra says that, or the Buddha explains, they say that people fight so much that those with any shred of morality left get so frightened they run away. And when the Great War has ended, they come out and they discover, oh, there are still living beings around, and they feel so relieved, and they make a pact never to hurt one another again. And from then on, every 100 years, the lifespan increases by 1 year until it reaches the pinnacle of human virtue, I guess, which is 84,000 years, and then the cycle begins again. And it's very interesting because there are Jataka tales of the Buddha's former lives, where the Buddha shares how some of his life stories from when human beings had 84,000 years. One of them, okay, this I didn't plan on sharing this, but since I'm talking, one of them was at that time when at the pinnacle, 84,000 years lifespan, people didn't know how to lie. People just naturally didn't lie until one day someone said they would deliberately tell a lie. And when he said that, people were very puzzled. They said, like, what do you mean you're going to lie? What does that mean? He says, oh, I'm going to say something which is not true. And then people still didn't understand. So he something happened and he said something which was not true. And when he said that, he lost the ability to fly. Apparently at that time, a lot of people could fly, or everyone could fly. And they said, oh, you should repent. You shouldn't have said that. But he was very stubborn and he said no. And so he repeated the lie. And the more he uttered the lie, the more he sank into the ground. Something like that. Yeah, so it's very interesting. Okay, coming back to, sorry for the detour. Okay, coming back. First stage is when the beings get reborn from their past life as a Brahma Deva, all right? What's the second stage? A nutritious form, rasa patavi, and forms, okay? And then they start to eat this. So this is the second stage. And because they start eating more and more, they become bound to, physically bound to earth. They can't fly away anymore. Then as a result of the fall to earth, in the third stage, the being's bodies coarsen. Some become beautiful, some are ugly. Before that, in the Brahma, in their Brahma bodies, they're all very beautiful. But now, they're less beautiful. Arrogance and conceit arise in the beautiful, and because of this, their source of food deteriorates. Can someone help me pronounce oh my god.
Deteriorate.
Okay, I know, but I can't say. Okay, thank you, Ron. Deteriorate. Okay, and they become Bhumi Papataka. Is the commentary isn't quite sure. Maybe they say maybe it's like a fungus. So the food becomes more like a fungus. And why? Because the people become more ugly. Ugly in terms of character. Okay, and then there's distinctions in their beauty. Now, in the fourth stage, there is further coarsening, resulting in greater differentiation of appearance. The beings begin to discriminate more between themselves. The Bhumi Pataka disappears and the food becomes creepers. So now it becomes more like plants. And then the fifth stage, sexual differentiation arises with division into male and female genders. So you have to remember, this takes a very, very long time, like billions upon billions of years, or hundreds of billions of years. Dwellings are built to conceal acts of sexual intercourse. This is how human beings begin to live in houses. Nourishment comes in the form of rice. So no longer even the creepers, but now comes in form of rice, which is quite different from the modern kind. It's not the rice that we know of. Okay, they call it rice to help us understand, but it's very different. Why? Because it grows naturally, and when it grows, there's no husk or chaff. Kind of like, when like bread. Yeah, it's like you just go to the plant and there's bread, and you just, it doesn't need any processing. So it says that which is taken for the morning meal is fully replenished by the evening. Okay, so that's how fast it grows. And then at that time, cooking vessels appeared, and the Pali word is called upajati, which implies they were generated by the karma of the beings rather than made in the ordinary fashion. Okay, and beings cook their rice by placing it in one of these vessels and placing that on top of a special rock which spontaneously generated a flame. They had no need of curries or spices because the rice took on whatever flavor they wished for. Okay, don't ask how. All right, you practice yourself until you can remember your past lives, and you can remember for yourself. Now, the sixth stage is marked by some beings becoming lazy about the daily chore of gathering the rice, and begin to harvest more rice for storage. This places stress on the plants, which begin to devolve into the modern type of rice, which requires more work to plant and harvest. All right, so if you ever thought about how difficult it is to plant food, you know who to blame. All right, this happens in the sixth stage. Then, this leads to the institution of private property as each seeks to work and protect his own field. Okay, people start becoming stingy. It is significant that the storing of food stocks is seen as a sixth step in the decline from the state of nature. Storing up goods to enjoy later is said to be one of the things an arahant will never do. Human society as we know it begins now with the institution of private property. And then finally, in the seventh and last stage, theft arises as some beings steal from others' fields, which leads to the institution of government to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. And still, this is a very, very long time before whatever recorded human history there is. All right, so this is how the Buddha explained when worlds come into being. And when a world comes into being, there is there's 1 billion worlds, under one Buddha land. So it's not just our world. There's another 999 worlds. I may have added 1 or 2 extra nines there. All right. Okay. Moving on. Today, what we're going to do is there's a very, very interesting sutra. Okay. Let me see who is online with us. Is that person here? No. Okay. There's a very interesting sutra called King Udayana's Questions. And what happened is this. The king had a lot of consorts. And one of his queen, which by the name of Queen Anupama, was very jealous of one of the other queens. So she falsely accused the other queen of having indecent relationships with the Buddha and the monks. So she complained to the king. He said, "Your Majesty, 500 women, including Queen Samawati, which was a very devout disciple of the Buddha, and who she didn't like at all. This Queen Anupana didn't like. So she spread a lie to the king, saying that this queen with the retinue of 500 women was having indecent acts with the Buddha and the monks. So she asked the king to go and punish this queen. And so the king stupidly believed her, and full of anger, when he saw this queen Saumawati, first thing he did, without even investigating, was he took his bow and arrow and he shot an arrow at the queen. And when the queen saw what was going on, she shouted out, she said, "I pay homage to the Buddha, the perfect dusk gone one." And then she bowed to the Buddha. But not only that, she entered into the first dhyana, and she used loving kindness to enter into the first dhyana. And then it is said that through the power of the Buddha, the arrow, the sharp arrow that was released or shot by the king, turned around and burst into flames. It turned around, it went above the king's head, and when it was above the king's head, it burst into flames. And it stayed there and burned. This fire was burning on top of his head. And this king didn't understand what was going on, and so he took another arrow and he shot at the queen, and the same thing happened. And then he took another arrow and he shot at the queen again. Again, the same thing happened. The arrow returned to the top of the king's head and burst into flames. You know, this sounds like the Universal Door chapter of Kuan Yin Bodhisattva in the Lotus Sutra. It says, if you invoke Kuan Yin's strength, what is Kuan Yin's strength? Loving kindness and compassion. You say, if you invoke Kuan Yin's strength, then no one can harm you. There's a lot of examples of how you can't be harmed. Yeah, so this is very, very real life example of that. Yeah. And then the queen, by this time, the king was terrified of what was going on, because it's not a normal occurrence. And the queen told the king, he said, "Great king, in this situation, if you were to bow before the Buddha, then you too would find well-being. That means your anxiety, your stress would go away." So the king did that, and then the king with his entourage went to look for the Buddha because he knew he made a mistake. He was thinking to himself, say, "Oh my, if a disciple of the Buddha is so powerful, what about the Buddha himself?" So at first he thought that his queen was some spirit or some heavenly being or some devil. And the queen said, "No, all I did was I paid homage to the Buddha and I practiced loving kindness." So now, if you look at your screen, we are at the part where the king has gone to find the Buddha, and then he's apologized. He said, "Blessed One," in that way, he explained what happened. Okay, he explained that he was fooled by his other queen, and he wanted to murder the other wife of his. And it says, "In that way, because I was like a fool, ignorant, unclear, and unwise, I felt rage and hatred towards the Buddha, the dusk gone one, and the assembly of disciples. For this, I request your forgiveness. In the presence of the assembly of disciples, I confess my errors." So this is him repenting. So he didn't have to go through a repentance ceremony because he was already repentful. So he just confessed in front of the Buddha. It says, "In the hope that you may show me compassion, I confess my errors. I request you, Blessed One, to treat me with kindness. I vow to practice restraint from this day forward." All right, because he was afraid of falling into the hells. All right. So then so these are just short excerpts of the sutra. The sutra is a bit long. So the Buddha said, "Okay, you have confessed. There's nothing to worry about." Then he asked the Buddha for advice. He said, "Because of how cruel, obstinate, and quick to anger I was, I have been driven to negative actions by the words of women. Because of that, Blessed One, I will go to the hell realms." And he said, "O Buddha, out of compassion for me, I request the Blessed One to describe thoroughly and correctly the faults of women, so that from today onward, I will not by any means fall under the sway of women and be driven to negative deeds that will lead me to fall into the hell realms. It will be for the long-term benefit of myself and all sentient beings that we may be helped and happy." All right, you all got that? Can any of you all spot what is wrong with his statement? Anyone want to volunteer? What's wrong with his
The fault
question to
of
the Buddha?
women.
Yes. Instead of accepting responsibility for himself, okay, for his own actions, he's still placing the blame on women. All right. And if you look at the world today, in a lot of places, that's what's going on. People who, can't see their own faults, they go and blame others for their faults. Yeah. All right. Okay. So he says, please describe thoroughly and correctly the behaviors of women, their characteristics, their treachery, deceitfulness. Okay, he gives a whole list, and the deceptiveness of women. Then the Buddha asked the king, he said, great king, what is your purpose in asking such questions? So he said, Blessed One, I fall under the sway of women because they're vicious, hateful, fierce, and quick to anger, because one of his wives is like that. Blessed One, it is women who will lead me to the hell realms. Thus, Blessed One, please heed this request of mine. Okay, guess what the Buddha said? Buddha said, great king, you must first understand your own faults, and then you will come to understand the faults of women. So this is it's like if you have a fault of being greedy, if you're very greedy, and along comes someone who spots your weakness, and then you get cheated out of money, you only have yourself to blame. Because for someone else, say who has taken the precepts and who's not greedy at all, there is no way you will be cheated by the trickster, right? So the Buddha says you have to know your own faults first, because it's not the faults of the other party, it's your own shortcomings that enable the faults to be that becomes a fault when it comes to you. So this is what Shufu meant, I think, when Shufu says that other people's faults are just your own. All right, so don't go looking for other people's faults. All right, don't say, oh, this gender, or that person has these faults and make me so angry or make me so upset. No, you have to be responsible for yourself. Okay, so this is where the sutra ends, because if you are interested in reading, you can go check out the sutra. Okay, it's TOH 73. You can type it in Google, TOH 73, and you will be able to find the whole sutra. Okay, let me see. What time is it? 10:13. We are supposed to stop at 10:30. This gives me 15 minutes. Okay, what I do have is more about gender. Very interesting, from the Vimalakirti Sutra as well as the Lotus Sutra. Both involve Venerable Shariputra. But let me keep that. Okay, let me see. Hold on. Just give me a second. Let me end this slideshow. And let me, because we have questions from last week that I haven't answered yet. Let me see if I should share anything before we get there. All right, hold on. Then Rangango Sutra. Okay. No. Okay, I'll get to the question. All right, let me just put this slide on. Okay. All right. So last week, the question that I did not get to answering was on the blurring of genders, or the mixing, or the not mixing, the blurring of the lines between male and female. Right now, there are people who are male who prefer to be female, or people who are female, born in a female body, but they feel that they prefer to be male instead. Or the person who asked the question said people who think they fall in the middle, or they there's just this blurring. Like some pop artists, they are, you can't quite tell if you take someone 30 years ago and you bring them to the future today, they'll look at these people and they say, I'm not sure if that's a man or woman. They can't really tell. And then there's all kinds of sexual preferences as well. So first thing is how we saw in how humans came to be on our planet Earth, for example. We know that gender only exists in certain realms of existence. And these realms of existence where there's gender are ruled predominantly by desire, anger, and hatred. All right? Because the purer realms, like the heavenly realms, as the further you go up, the desire lessens until even gender disappears. Okay. And then gender only matters when we are still bound or controlled by our karma. But beyond that, once you have gone beyond that, maybe next week we'll look at Guanyin Bodhisattva and how we can go beyond. Once you go beyond that, you achieve true freedom. And then you realize that gender is false. Gender is actually a false construct. And it is like when you go beyond the realm of when you're no longer controlled by your karma, and you will see the process of people changing bodies, kind of like, say, if you're an actor and every day you play a particular role, and when you play a role, you put on makeup, you wear the clothes to suit the role. So one day you're a child, the other day you might even play an animal, and then another day you might play an old lady, an old man, a woman. Every day you're playing a different role. And because you know you're the actor, you're never confused by the role that you play, right? But when you are bound by karma and ignorance and you don't understand what's really going on, you take the role that you inhabit on a very temporary basis. How temporary, how fleeting. The Buddha says, like dewdrops, like bubbles, like foam. 1 minute is there, the next minute is gone. That's how ethereal our current existence is. So when we are bound by ignorance, we get attached to the role that we play, and we think that the role defines who we are rather than we define the role. All right? So that's what happens when we get attached or confused about the form that we have. And when we get attached or confused, then we allow the form to determine our happiness and contentment. So now there are many people who are not satisfied with their bodies. And this is what happens in our confusion. We place material aspects first, such as appearances, instead of the inner character. So this decline, you can see it happens in all the religions, even Buddhism. When people get attached to the form and they forget the spirit or the true meaning behind the practice. So the form of the practice takes precedence over what is supposed to be the intention or the intentionality of the practice. So in some places, just because you wear the right clothes, you are seen as pious. Or just because you say the right words, you are seen as a good example of the belief rather than what you do. So there's a lot of hypocrisy going around. And the problem with our existence of that we cannot get by without duality, which means discrimination, is we make differences, and the differences mean a lot to us. So like last week we saw how like we look down on people who are poor, who are illiterate, who are not intelligent. But when it comes to the potential for awakening in the Dharma, the sixth patriarch who was poor and illiterate and looked different, he became the sixth patriarch. Then we have the courtesan who became a third stage arhat. And what else? We had the mass murderer, Angulimala, right? Okay. So, this confusion about appearances is also linked to the fact that conditioned existence is full of suffering. Suffering, there are many. Oh, I have this slide. Okay, hold on. Let me show you this slide, all right? Okay, let me see how to select a slide. See all slides. Okay, good. I have this slide. Where is it? All right, here. Okay, there you go. Okay, this is called the Sankasana Sutta. Okay, suffering. I call it suffering. What in this sutra the Buddha says, this is the noble truth of suffering, such has been made known by me. In this statement, this is the noble truth of suffering. There are innumerable nuances, innumerable details, innumerable implications. So the Buddha goes on to repeat the same for the other three noble truths. And then the Buddha says you should strive to understand. So suffering is not just the straightforward 8 forms of suffering, which is suffering of birth and death, suffering of being apart from those you love and being forced near those you dislike, and all those suffering of old age, and sickness, decay, those 8 sufferings. It's not just that. Dukkha, suffering, is actually very, very deep. It affects every single part of our existence, because it is the dissatisfaction of life itself. It is no matter what happens in life, your happiness does not last. There's always something that you're not happy about, because you can be happy with this thing and then something else makes you unhappy. And then when you solve that problem with that unhappiness that you have, another thing makes you unhappy. So there's always this constant search for bliss that never comes, or short-lived. You may find it for a while and then it goes away. And in our current environment, the way the world is right now, it has manifested in people being extremely dissatisfied with their bodies. So it's just another form or another symptom of the deeper problem, which is ignorance. Okay, and let me see what else I want to say about this. So for a group of people, it exhibits, the symptoms come up in the form of gender, dissatisfaction with their body. And it's not just dissatisfaction of body comes now in many forms. Some people want to look more fit, some people want to lose weight, there are some people who actually feel happier if they were to lose a limb or something. I'm not sure what that condition is called. So there's always something that makes you unhappy. Yeah. Even if you could solve this problem, it's going to be something else. Money, your family, how people see you, your height, the fact that you age, whatever it is, it's never going to end. Yeah. So this is what happens when we don't understand cause and effect, and we place our attention at the symptoms instead of the root cause. And it's kind of like we worry about money for the future, but we don't understand enough, because we're ignorant, that we're supposed to save instead of spending all the money that we have, if that's what if we want to be secure about our future. So we don't understand how to create the causes for the conditions that we want. Yeah. So if we don't solve our problems of ignorance, for example, life after life is just going to manifest again and again and again. So depending on the conditions of the world that you are in, depending on your personal conditions, then this dissatisfaction will just manifest as a symptoms based on what you have. Yeah, that's just the reality of conditioned existence. There's no permanent happiness. There's no permanent satisfaction. It's very, very fleeting. There is always something to be dissatisfied about. Yeah. All right. But if we practice and we make vows, we can shape our conditions for the future. So next week, let me see. Next week I will share a sutra with you on how people have made vows to retain a female body life after life. Yeah. Okay. And then there's one more question that was asked. Let me see if that person is here with us today. No. Okay. I think Lucy asked the question, and Lucy is not here. Right? Are you here, Lucy? No. Usually she joins. Okay. Lucy's question was being vegetarian. Is it a must? Okay, I'm going to ask everyone, what do you all think? Is it a must to be a vegetarian? Nobody? You can type into the chat box if you want. Yes, Peggy.
I think it's a must if you wanted to become a true Buddhist.
Okay. But the Theravadans, the Buddhists in Sri Lanka, Thailand would disagree.
That's just my interpretation, I guess.
Okay. All right. So in Buddhism, okay, it's not really must. Yeah. Because Buddhism doesn't force you. And so that's why some people are surprised that there are sutras where the Buddha, like a couple, I shared this sutra before, an old couple, they came to the Buddha and the man tells the Buddha, I said, oh, ever since I was 16 years old and I saw my wife, saw my wife for the first time, I was totally in love with her, and every day my love for her just grows deeper, and I want to be with her forever in life after life. And then she says the same thing to the Buddha. I say, oh yeah, for me when I was 16 years old, I saw my husband and I just fell in love, and every day we have a wonderful married life. And then both of them want to know how can they remain married life after life. And the Buddha never tells them that, oh, desire will cause you suffering, your happiness is impermanent. The Buddha never discourages them at all. And in fact, what the Buddha does is, you want to remain husband and wife in life after life. And the Buddha say you must share the same virtues. First, you must develop virtue, like the precepts, but you must share the same virtue. Then whether you're born in the heavens or as humans, then you can remain together in life after life. Why did the Buddha tell that to them? Because that was what they wanted. If the Buddha said, oh no, you must end birth and death, and how many lifetimes you were born, you have shed enough tears to fill up oceans, and your bones are enough taller than Mount Sumeru or Mount Everest, they would say, why is the Buddha telling me all this? That's not what I want to know. I don't care about all those things, So when the Buddha teaches all the Dharma that we have right now, that's accessible to us, all those are expedients. All those are just taught based on the inclination of humans. So the Buddha never forced people. The only time the Buddha would scold a person was, for example, if you wanted something and you say you want something and then you commit yourself. So like monks, the Buddha would scold monks. Why? Because when you become a monk, it's not because anyone wants you to become a monk, it's because you do it for yourself. The practice is for yourself. So the Buddha would scold monks who have voluntarily accepted the precepts and then they go against the precepts or they go against the teachings. And then the Buddha would say things like foolish man or useless person, haven't I not taught you this? But the Buddha would do it out of compassion to bring them back, to what they should be doing, because that's what they want to do. All right. So is it a must to be a vegetarian? It depends. It depends on your intention of what you want. The reason why we are vegetarians is because, like Shifu say, a lot of unhappiness in this world comes from killing. And when you consume animals for yourself, you take a part in the killing karma. And karma is not off by a bit. Karma is very exact. Whatever you take part in, that much you have to pay back. Okay, we have the story where the Buddha had a headache for 3 days. You remember that story? So what happened was this story is very famous for cause and effect, because in a past life, the Buddha was a young boy in a village, and they had a great famine going on. So the village was near a lake, and the lake started getting more drier and drier and drier. And the villagers started having less and less food to eat. So eventually the lake dried up to the extent where the villagers caught 2 very big fish from the lake. So the Buddha, out of compassion, there are different variations to the story. I'll just tell the variant that I know. If you look for it online, you might find slightly different details. It doesn't make a difference. The principle is still the same. The Buddha, out of compassion, because he didn't want the fish to suffer, he took a stick and he hit the fish on the head so that the fish would be unconscious, because the villagers were going to slaughter the fish for food. So then fast forward to this present lifetime of the Buddha, and the Buddha had to undergo a headache for 3 days. Why? Because he hit the fish on the head. All right. Not only that, the people in the village who consumed the fish in the Buddha's lifetime, they all became the Shakya clan. They were all one family member under the Shakya clan. And the fish, the 2 fish that they murdered, this is a long story, so I'll give you the short version. There was a king who wanted to marry into the Shakya clan, but the Shakya family members looked down on him because he was not a strong king. He didn't have made a lot of assets. His kingdom wasn't big. So they played a trick on him. They gave him a slave girl, and they told him, "Oh, this is one of our princes." So he married a slave girl, and he had a son. Okay, this son was one of the fish that was murdered. So when the son was a few years, I don't remember how old, I think it might be 10 years old or something, the Shaka clan never wanted to mix with this son. Why? Because he was the son of, the mother was a slave, wasn't part of them. But they didn't know, the other side of the family didn't know, right? So one day something happened, and they were forced to be host to this son. And then the son had his attendant, the prince and his attendant. So as the prince was playing around, he climbed onto the throne of the king, which is the Buddha's father. And he heard the Shaka clan making fun of him, like, "Oh, he's just a son of a slave girl. Who does he think he is, sitting on the throne?" So he turned to his attendant, and he said, "When I become the king, can you remind me of today? All these things that they're saying about me." So the attendant said, "Okay." And who was the attendant? The attendant was the second big fish that they caught. So there were 2 fish, right? So the 2 fish was the prince and his attendant. So when he became the king, I think he murdered his father, and he became the king. The attendant reminded him of this story, and he set out to kill the entire Shaka clan. All right. So Mahakasyapa, or let me see, I think it was Mahakasyapa, the one with foremost in spiritual powers. No, Mahakasyapa is foremost in ascetic practices. Anyone know which monk? Okay, anyway, the Buddha's monk, who was foremost in spiritual powers, said, "Oh, I cannot allow the Shaka clan to be killed." So he went to see the Buddha. Buddha didn't do anything. Okay, so what this monk did was he took all of them in his bowl, in his alms bowl. He used his magic powers He scooped up the entire Shaka family clan, I think there were 500 or something of them, put them in his bowl, and he put them in heaven. He thought a safe place where this king, the fish in a former life, would not be able to find them, right? Okay. But after a while, when he opened his bowl, all he found was blood. So the Buddha said, this is cause and effect. Even with your spiritual powers, you are unable to prevent things from happening when the conditions become right. Yeah. So killing karma, you don't want to do anything that will incur future suffering for yourself. So that's why we are vegetarians. Mahayana Buddhists are vegetarians. That's one reason. Second reason is out of compassion. There are many sutras that the Buddha says that we've been reborn so many times that you cannot find another person who has not been your relative at one time. So how can you bring yourself to eat that fish or chicken if you realize that used to be your son, or used to be your mother, or used to be your father? I'm not talking about using imagination, but when you actually see that, can you bring yourself to consume that food? No. And then third, for Mahayana Buddhists, we want to become Buddhas. So Bodhisattvas, out of compassion, they treat all living beings as if they were their own relatives, putting aside that true relative connection. That's how they regard all living beings. As younger people would be their siblings or your children. Elder people would be your parents or your grandparents. So when you have that kind of distinction, and not only that, you realize that, when you're born from one life to the other, you just rotate around the heavens, humans, the hells, the animal realm, but the consciousness is still there, So you don't want to do anything that causes or contribute to the suffering of any living being. You just cannot bring yourself to do it. Okay, so Sri Ling says Mahamagaliana. Thank you so much. Yes, it was Venerable Mahamagaliana, foremost in spiritual powers. He's the one, Sri Ling said, wanted to rescue his mother, not from the hells, but as a hungry ghost. Yeah, Ulam Bana. We have Ulam Bana thanks to Venerable Mahamagaliana. So do we have to be a vegetarian? No. Buddhism doesn't say you have to be, but you should be, depending on your level, on where you are on the path. So although it's a good thing, all right, although being a vegetarian is a good thing, you cannot force people to be vegetarians. You cannot say, oh, because it's good, therefore I'm going to force you to do it. What is that called? That's called oppression. Because you believe in something that another person may not believe in, so it's not the right time for that person yet. So there have been numerous occasions where sometimes it is not the best thing to tell someone you have to be vegetarian. When the time is right, when the conditions are right, when they understand enough and the conditions come into play, then they will naturally do the right thing. Yeah. So although it's very good, one of the best things you can do for yourself, it's not something that you should force onto others. You can explain why you do it, but you cannot force other people to do it. Okay, because then it will not have the desired effect. All right. Okay. Let me see. All right. Past time. It's already 10:40. Before we adjourn for today, does anyone have anything you want to bring up? Anything you remembered? Anything you want to share that will help people? Or any questions? Okay. So the important thing is, in this world, okay, when just like last week we talked about gender, in this world, or like sexual preference, like homosexuality and all that, in this world, it is very important not to condemn people for who they are. I'm not saying approve every single thing every single person does. No, that's a totally different thing. Okay, what I mean is that we should not look down on people because everyone is the way they are. All of us, we are who we are because of our past karma. You could say that we've been programmed. Okay, our personalities, our likes and dislikes has been programmed by our past lives. To change that program is very, very hard. You know, they say a leopard can't change his spots. You can't teach an old dog new tricks and whatever. What else? Yeah, it's very, very hard to change that programming. You have to really activate the very wholesome seeds that you have planted before and have real faith and conviction, confidence in yourself and in the teachings of the Buddha to take that step and to take control and take responsibility for yourself. Yeah, so it's very, very hard. That's why they say the gradual school. Gradual school is bit by bit. You change your habit, you change your programming. That's the gradual school. But you do it enough, and because of the past seeds that we have planted that we don't realize that we have planted, then if you're fortunate enough to meet a good knowing advisor, then they can activate those seeds that make you enlightened. So for example, like the Theravada school, for them, the eminent monks, from their understanding of the sutras, so the sutras, the Pali canon that the Buddha teaches in those sutras, from there comes the Theravada school, where they say, okay, your aim, if you're a Buddhist practitioner, your aim should be to be born during the time of Maitreya Bodhisattva, Buddha. When Maitreya Bodhisattva comes to earth, or Jambudvipa, and becomes the next Buddha, your aim as a Buddhist practitioner is to be born at that time. Why? Because Buddhas can see all your karmic seeds. And that is why so many people get enlightened when the Buddha is around, because the Buddha knows how to create the conditions for those karmic seeds to be activated. All right? So the Theravada school, you can say that's kind of like, we have Pure Land, Amitabha Pure Land. For them, they have that. Yeah. All right? Okay. So let me get the transference of merit. Okay, we'll put my palms together. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Oh, before we do the bowing, I just want to add that as Buddhists, okay, sometimes we're not sure about if we are ready to do something like like changing our diets and becoming a vegetarian. The best advice I can give to y'all is, if you know it's good, don't think, just do it. Yeah. The more you think, the more unwholesome seeds will arise that might convince you otherwise. So you just become your own enemy, your worst enemy. But if you don't think, why? Because it's the Dharma and you have confidence in the Buddha, although you think you're not ready, say the Bodhisattva precepts or the 5 precepts, becoming a vegetarian or the 8 fasting precepts, just commit yourself and then try your best and see what happens. Yeah, that's the best advice I can give. All right. Okay, 3 bows to the Buddha. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Bowing respect to the Venerable Master. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Okay, Amitabha everyone. Remember, next week we will start 15 minutes earlier. Okay, sorry. Someone wanted to say something?
No, thank you, Faster. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.